Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our Ask an Expert series here at the IKEA Foundation. Welcome. My name is Ryan Strauss, and I'm part of the communications team. I am very, very happy today to introduce Liz McKeon, who is responsible for our climate action work here at the IKEA Foundation. Liz, hello.
Hi. Hey, Ryan. Thanks. And thanks, everybody, for joining us online. If you are in Europe or south of Europe, good afternoon. If you're east of us, good evening. And if you're west of us, good morning. Thank you for all the questions that you submitted online. We're going to answer them all either today in this live session or afterwards. By Monday, we'll publish it on our website. So please check back. Let me start just by saying a word about the IKEA Foundation. If this is your first time at Ask the Expert, the IKEA Foundation is funded by Ingka Foundation, which is the owner of the Ingka Group of companies. And that's the largest franchisee of IKEA with stores in more than 30 countries. The IKEA Foundation is independent from the retail business, and its sole focus is to create a better everyday life for the many people around the world and to protect the planet. And we do this through philanthropy and grant making. Now, as Ryan said, I head our climate action work, and that is an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions so that we slow global warming to 1.5 degrees. And we see climate action as a collective responsibility. It requires a full ecosystem of change because we believe that people as consumers or citizens, as families and in their communities, they deserve a healthy planet and a chance to have a better everyday life. So we encourage corporations to reduce their emissions to levels recommended by science. We try to see that the finance sector is pricing risk better. If you're a heavy emitter, that it's higher. And we believe so much in the importance of people making their needs known for that healthy planet. So our theme today is perhaps the most important and timely one of today's discussion, which is climate movements, because one of the consequences of the struggle to bring the COVID-19 pandemic under control is that physical movement is restricted and engaging with other people has radically changed. So during the current lockdown, we have to think about new ways to do this. How can we build and continue to build a climate movement when people can't meet in person? Now, fortunately, we have two amazing experts to join us today for this discussion, and I'd like to introduce them. First, Jessy Tolkan. She's a partner at Purpose, and that is, hey, Jessy, that is a mission-driven agency that builds and supports social movements around the world to address some of the world's most pressing problems. And in her role as Chief Campaigns Officer, she leads the Purpose Climate Lab, which has built ambition for just climate solutions in many countries around the world. So welcome, Jessy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we have the double threat Jessy today because we have a second Jessy that I'd like to introduce, Jessy Macneil-Brown, who is the the campaigns unit manager at the Ingka Group. And I mentioned earlier that Ingka is the largest franchisee of IKEA. And Jessy Macneil-Brown has over 10 years, over a decade of experience in campaigns and public affairs and marketing and communications in international organizations. She's kind of recent to Ingka Group, but she has experience around the world leading global campaigns, both for Amnesty International and most recently as head of global activism for The Body Shop, where she led some of the company's most successful campaigns against animal testing and sex trafficking for children and young people. So welcome to both of you. I'm excited to kick this off. And I would like to start, if I can, with Jessy Macneil-Brown. Tell me, it's so interesting and unusual to hear about a campaigner at a company. So how is Ingka responding to the current situation?
Yeah, so I actually started my job with the IKEA Group on the 2nd of March. So just as COVID was starting to have a huge impact. So at the time for IKEA, it was just our Chinese stores that were closed, but that quickly spiraled into what we have now. So it has been quite a time of change, rapid change. Our teams around the world are continuing to manage that change on a daily process, daily process. And talking about campaigning for the IKEA Group, so there is a lot of work that the IKEA Group do on sustainability, focused on the supply chain, how we make our products, how we sell our products. But there's this growing realization, and I think more so now than ever with the COVID crisis, that we cannot bring in change on our own. No organization, no individual can bring about real change on their own, and that change has to come with the many people. So we want to engage our customers, to bring them on this journey with us, to bring our many co-workers from all around the world, and to work with the amazing external stakeholders and partners that we have, to work with government and to work with other business to drive the change that is needed for the climate and the people in our planet. And we're seeing some great opportunities come out of the COVID crisis, which I'm looking forward to discussing today.
That's great. Actually, I'm going to follow up right away, if I can, with you, Jessie, by turning to some of the questions that we got in online prior to our session today. And one comes from Sheena Thompson. How can we better engage with corporates in mitigating and reducing climate-related risks to people, planet, and goods and service providers? And if you could speak based on how you do it there, how would you inspire other corporations to do that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm going to say a big hello to Sheena, because I know Sheena who sent in that question, and I know this is something that she works with on a daily basis as well. We're finding some big opportunities as a business. So obviously, the government is the governments in many countries around the world now are looking at not only how they respond to the COVID crisis, but how do they restart their economies, and business is going to be essential to that. So we have a real opportunity within business to be working with the government in how we respond and come out of the COVID crisis. We also, from a customer perspective, we need to demonstrate with customers, with business, together in that collaboration to governments what is needed. We need to show them the will of the people. We need to show them what we care about and what is most important to us. And I think we've seen some great examples of how people have worked together, how activists have worked together in the COVID crisis to draw attention to the government of critical issues that they need responding to. And we have seen some governments respond quite quickly to the issues that are really important and critical. So I think we need to continue that work and continue that collaboration. And that is something that at IKEA we are incredibly focused on at the moment, is how do we collaborate? How do we bring all the information and the data together, because this is all happening in real time? And how do we work collaboratively on the solutions that are needed? A lot of the time that is needed at speed. And within business, how do we share our insights, our solutions, and how do we work together to impact the governments as well?
That's so important. Thank you, Jessie. I'm going to turn to our other Jessie, Jessy Tolkan, and ask you a question that was sent in to us by Kim Van Dyke. Can you give some examples of how you were able to improvise moving your campaigns forward in a different way because of the pandemic?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the question. And it's great to be on today with you, Liz, and with Jessie. This has changed the world faster than almost anything any of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes. And while there's no question that millions of people around the world right now are very focused on the kind of crisis we can see and feel, which is COVID-19, as a climate campaigner, as a campaigner fighting hard for big, ambitious climate solutions, it simply wasn't an option for us to stop our work to advance our fight for a clean and just energy future in this moment. And so all across the world right now, our teams in Brazil, in Kenya, in India, we have taken this moment to be an opportunity for us to embrace the idea of adaptation. Now, certainly we tend to talk about adaptation in the context of what we'll need to do to adapt to climate change. And that's an important theme I want to come back to. But we've quickly adapted to new means and mechanisms, approaches and strategies to being able to mobilize individuals in this moment. As over 2 billion people across the planet have been at home under stay-at-home orders, we've actually found that this is a moment where individuals are looking more than ever for opportunities to engage in causes. As people kind of struggle with the intensity of what's happening in their communities and countries around the world, a big conversation is emerging about how do we want to come back into the world? And so we have done things to give individual citizens all around the world an opportunity to start thinking and dreaming and advocating and communicating with leaders about what kind of recovery we will need coming out of COVID-19, how that can completely and directly intersect with some of the urgent solutions we need to address the climate crisis. We have become, even more diligent users of WhatsApp to make sure that people are staying connected to critical information on how to deal with the virus, as well as how to be good advocates in their own right. We essentially live on Zoom and Zoom breakout rooms and have had the ability to still hold community and countrywide meetings. So we are adapting in the moment and trying to really keep our advocacy spirit alive and vibrant at this time.
That's great, Jessie. And I know how creative your teams are and how the circumstances in countries will really be very, very different relative to what climate fight they're fighting, if it is about air quality or about water or something else. Could you just think across the range of all the things that you have been doing and the creative work of your team, just give one example from one of those regions that helps bring it alive for us?
Absolutely. So, a quick example from our work in India, it's for many years now, with the support of the IKEA Foundation, the Purpose Climate Lab has been so proud to be engaging on a whole myriad of issues, but in particular on what we would call the air quality crisis, and really trying to fight for the fundamental right for citizens across the country to breathe healthy and clean air. There's a paradox almost at play right now where as countries' economies have come to a standstill, there has been an immediate environmental impact to that. So folks in Delhi and other parts of India may be breathing cleaner air right now than they ever have before. Our work in this moment has to be clear and careful. We like that there's cleaner air for Indian residents and citizens to breathe. And we don't believe that clean air needs to come at the cost of bringing an economy to a grinding halt. But we see what's happening amongst citizens is an appreciation and understanding for what it could be like for their children to be able to play outside, to breathe without challenges and without health risks, et cetera. And so in India, we've been really working to point a light on what it means to fight for the health and well-being of citizens, both in the time of the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. How important it will be for the Delhi government to continue its work and investment in clean transport. Just one more quick example I'm going to throw in there. In the UK, farmers in the agricultural community, of course, are being hit particularly hard in this moment. And we're really proud to be shining a light of support on the UK family farmers and their critical role in the supply chain, and also their critical role in the solutions we will need to the climate crisis. In Brazil, we're working with communities that are both at the forefront of experiencing the impacts of climate change in low-income communities of color, and really shining a spotlight on also how they're disproportionately realizing the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, and recognizing that government must prioritize the fair and equitable distribution of solutions to those communities. So all around the world, really keeping our climate and energy agenda front and center, but recognizing that must be integrated in this moment with the COVID-19 crisis people are feeling.
That's great, Jessie. Thank you. I'm always reminded, and we've been partnering, of course, with Purpose for 5 or 6 years now, and the creativity that comes out in the work is much more than what you would expect in movements with people with signs in the street. It is the creative expression of what people really want and desire, and all the different ways that they do it. It's always so inspiring to see how people come forward with their creative ideas, and trying to do that online has got to be even more complicated now, or maybe easier. I don't know. But I'm going to turn back to some of our audience questions, and we'll probe your thoughts each further on this. Rana A asks, what can we learn or take away from this pandemic experience? And how can we act to continue mitigation measures for climate change going forward? So Jessy Macneil-Brown, I'm going to turn to you first. Give us a sense from how companies do that and what you see as the big takeaway.
Yeah, so at IKEA, it's been a huge learning from us, and I think something in the positive, which everyone around the business, and I hear it in a number of calls that I'm on regularly, is we have learned that we can do things at speed. And we can do things more quickly than we thought we could. And as a business, we've had to respond. We've had to try to do things more digitally. So looking at our e-commerce and our online channels, how can we get those moving much more quickly and at the scale that our customers want from us? How can we get out into our communities and respond to the issues that are most critical to them? How can we as a business be contributing to some of the relief efforts? And that has also been such a wonderful thing to watch in all our countries around the world as our co-workers are going out into the communities. In Bratislava, for example, they helped set up 30 homeless rooms for homeless people to help them with the crisis. We've had our Canadian team donate over $2 million to relief efforts. So I think there's also been that realization that we can embed ourselves in the communities even more and help when our communities need us. And that's something that I know that we'll be wanting to do well after the crisis.
That's very moving and touching to see how people have taken their day-to-day work and their values for that company and really brought it forward. Jessy Tolkan, what do you think the climate movement community is learning? What are their takeaways from this pandemic experience, and how are they going to work going forward?
Absolutely. I think we're all realizing inside the climate movement, outside the climate movement, just how interconnected we are. And this is something that, of course, has been part of the conversation for a really long time, but the health and well-being of people in other parts of the world ultimately is going to affect us in a very real way. And there is such a deep parallel there when we're talking about addressing the climate crisis, right? That we have to learn from one another. We have to learn from the governments that have responded well to this virus. We have to, be in solidarity with one another as community by community and population by population goes through this crisis. And there is such an example there in how we have to fight the climate crisis. And Liz, I know you know about this all too well, but in our climate lab, we've always taken this approach of kind of piloting solutions in certain parts of the world. And if they go well, hoping to accelerate and scale those solutions around the world. I think we're seeing that happen on steroids right now. We're seeing the way that physicians and nurses, communities in every part of the globe are really relying on one another and learning from one another around the world to get through this very difficult time. I think I just also have to highlight and get a little aggressive on the kind of political climate agenda here, which is that, and it's to Jessy's point, we have seen how fast we can act, right? We have seen governments move at a pace previously thought unimaginable, to deploy financial resources, to pass policy, to come to the defense of their communities. Well, COVID-19 is the crisis that we can see, and climate change may be the crisis that is less visible, in a day in and day out kind of way. But we have to make sure that we're ready to pressure governments to say, we know you can move. We know that you can deploy resources. We know you can act faster. And of course, one thing that hasn't changed in this moment is the absolute urgency with which we need to raise our ambition in reducing carbon, investing in clean and renewable energy, and really, implementing the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah, that comment about speed and about interdependence is really striking to me. Let me turn back to Jessy Macneil-Brown for a follow-up thought on that one.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Jessie, that we don't have any more time to respond to the climate crisis. And this is something that, in addition to responding to our business needs, we've also had a lot of work going on, and that will continue to go on at IKEA, around how do we come out of this COVID crisis and also keep to the Paris Agreement, and how do we hit those targets that we need to. And this is something that goes right up to our CEO. The business is so fully committed behind this. We're working with a lot of external partners. We're doing a lot of research. And what we're finding out is that our recovery to COVID can be green. It doesn't need to come at any extra cost or inconvenience. But now is the time, and now is the time that we should be putting pressure on our governments to say it's easy now. We have to change things. We can't go back to the way they were. So let's look at that green, sustainable recovery. And we know that things like investing in green energy, that will bring more jobs. We know that shortening our supply chains, that's not to the detriment of the people that we support through those supply chains, but that can have an impact on the climate as well. So at IKEA, we are really focused on those targets. And unfortunately, the COP meeting was delayed from the end of this year. We are keeping an eye on that situation very closely, because we feel we have a role to play, and that a lot of business has a role to play here. And so we're also working with other businesses as part of the B team to look at how we can work with governments. And we're really encouraged with the announcements that have been coming out from the EU in the past couple of weeks, the G20 as well, the finance ministers, and the commitments that they made last week. So it is looking very positive, and we've got the numbers to back this up. This kind of investment is going to bring that resilience that we need in the world post-COVID. So watch this space. This is an area that IKEA is very committed to, and we want to do a lot of work in this area.
Both of you are so inspiring in the way you describe this, because green, speed, togetherness, collaboration. You know, if I were just to reflect on this otherwise tragic moment philosophically, it is the same amount of and speed of globalization that connects us all to goods and services in parts of the world that also carried the pandemic so effectively to many countries and created suffering. But we can turn that around so that the unprecedented collaboration that we all believe in and the speed at which we act can also be the remedy in many ways to heal the planet and to help people thrive going forward. And I take such great inspiration from both your words and also many of the partners that we have that work in that same spirit. So I want to really thank you for it adding that extra kind of vigor to the urgency of the discussion. If I can, I'm going to turn to another question that came in from our audience. And this one comes from Aileen McCready. She asks, what would be your advice around keeping communities working together and not running back to what they feel is normal? It's a very personal, kind of feels very real, doesn't it? Jessy Tolkan, let's start off with you.
Yes. I mean, as we have been in discussion with communities all over the world in these past few weeks, I think a theme that we keep coming back to is there is no such thing as going back, that there is a new normal that is setting in, and that we will, as human beings, as individuals, as companies, as organizations, really be forever changed. We have never seen something in this current lifetime at this scale that we've all gone through in such a similar way. So I think we're preparing for a reality in which there is a new normal. But the question is really important, because it's one thing to sit here right now with much more quiet time than we've ever had, with less hustle and bustle of life, and say, when we go back into the world, we'll have more appreciation for everything. We'll have our priorities in check. And then the hustle and bustle of the world will come back. So, you know, I think some of the organizing and campaigning we're trying to do around the world right now is really help communities and individuals come together to assert that vision for what they want now, to be having conversations on how they want their communities to operate, to begin to set out that vision for the leaders at the local, state, federal, and global level on what our expectation is moving forward. we see such powerful human to human engagement happening even in this moment of extreme social distancing. And we think that can be powerful in forming the bonds of movements required, to really enforce and build on this vision of the future. I have joked with my team at times that we need to write a letter to ourselves. When we're telling each other we miss the office, we miss the hectic schedule, we have to remind ourselves of that feeling months from now when we're hopefully back in the world. But it's a good question to think about. And I do think that the fundamental change in new normal is the fuel we're actually going to need to access creative and dynamic thinking to rebuild our economies and get back to open in a new way.
Thanks, Jessie. The way you say it, it also reminds me that we're probably witnessing also new voices of leadership come up from these communities because they see the stress that they're under. They want something different. And we need to find, even as a philanthropy, a way to give those voices expression at an even greater pace. Jessy Macneil-Brown, how are you seeing, what do you think is happening in communities? I always think about every place I've lived, if I've been in proximity to an IKEA store, I've become part of that community in a way. Because I've relocated around the world and it's often my first port of call to get the necessary things I need in a new environment. But broadening that out, what would be your advice around keeping communities working together and not going back to the new normal? And I say this recognizing that product companies are also in that difficult position, right? Because you're trying to sell things, and that's important to the profitability of the company. So, how do you approach this from IKEA's standpoint?
Yeah, so from an IKEA standpoint, we actually have a fantastic internal and external campaign that we're launching on Monday. And the hashtag is already out there. It's called #TogetherWithKindness. And this is all about collaboration and sharing the community, where we are sharing both internally, and we want to share this externally as well, all the amazing work, all the amazing moments that our teams are having within their communities, where they're giving back or they're supporting their community in some way. And so we've started to see things happening on Instagram with the hashtag, but this is also our way of supporting our teams globally as well, because we've got to share ideas. And this is so great to see at a time when people might be stressed or wanting to do something but not knowing how, or it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to think clearly in very stressful times. So we've got this hashtag, we've got an internal site, we're going to have an external website so that we can be pooling those ideas. We're also coming together within our teams virtually, whether that's on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or every 2 weeks or every month, just to check in with each other, because I think that self-care and just giving people the permission that it's okay to not be okay right now. It's okay to need your space, but let's talk this through together. You've got the support. And if you need anything, we're here for you. And it's just wonderful to see that across the IKEA communities all around the world, where our co-workers and our colleagues are coming together to share their experiences, what they've learnt. It was a really big day for IKEA yesterday, where our Wuhan store reopened. It was quite an emotional day for everyone. But we're learning from our colleagues in China, and they're sharing with us what they did, how things are moving now. And for some countries who are now starting to reopen stores, we're moving into the next phase. And how do we support each other in that next phase as some people start returning to work and opening stores again? From a personal perspective, I also wanted to make some observations about community, because it has been incredible to see how people have reconnected with their local communities. I'm in the UK at the moment, and I know so many people here who have suddenly met their neighbours for the first time, who suddenly have a WhatsApp group for their neighbourhood. And I'm sure many of you have seen the headlines where the most unlikely heroes come out, especially in fundraising. Major Tom in the UK, he's raised £28 million for the NHS by walking around his garden. So I think we are going to see new heroes from our communities that will pull together fundraising in ways we had never expected, who will bring together activism in ways that we've never expected. So let's encourage that. Let's keep those WhatsApp groups going. Let's keep the Zoom calls going, the house parties, whatever platform you're on. But let's stay connected when we come out of this crisis. And this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is going to be going for some time. So please stay connected. Make sure you're calling your friends and you're connecting in with your parents and your colleagues, and just offering them that shoulder of support if they need it.
That's really great advice. And I love the fact that that hashtag Together with Kindness stands not only for what we believe and what we want to see happen, but it also stands in this great contrast to what physical social distancing feels like. We can still really, really be together. Jessy Tolkan, do you have any other thoughts on how, actually this came in even as a question from someone online, what does togetherness look like for you these days? And how do you create togetherness online in your campaigns and also in your work environment? That was submitted by Haywood online. So Jessy Tolkan, what do you think about that?
Absolutely. I'm going to answer this in a few different ways. I'm so proud to be a part of a remarkable global team with purpose. And, you know, we work across Brazil and Poland and Bulgaria and the UK and Kenya and Australia and India, and I'm sure that I've forgotten someone in that mix. But we really are leaning in to making sure that we're there for one another in this moment. I'm so proud that I think how we are as human beings, our humanity is shining through so much. We're not really starting any meetings or Zoom calls without checking in just to see how we're all doing and asking one another what we need. We have Zoom channels we can join that would be as if we were having a conversation in the office, in the kitchen, grabbing a cup of coffee. We have, daily video happy hour sessions. We've played trivia together as a team. And I would just say those things aren't trivial. We have to really nourish our whole beings and really think about the multitude of circumstances that people are enduring in this moment. And it's really critical, as someone who has spent their life in the business of organizing and mobilizing people, that we understand the true full picture of where individuals and human beings are at in this moment. Whether it's the challenge of working full time and being a parent and not having childcare, whether it's being part of a more compromised set of the population that makes this medical situation even scarier. Of course, I'm just watching the unemployment numbers come in again this week in the United States. Now almost 26 million Americans as one example that have applied for unemployment. So I think part of how we're showing up is trying to really remain focused on all of these different factors and supporting people in a really deep way to be able to endure, given all of that really critical, real, background situation. And that plays out in how we're staying connected with our partner organizations on the ground. We work with hundreds of grassroots organizations all around the world who are experiencing this in a myriad of different ways. And we're trying to be there, to be flexible, to say, it might not be the moment to continue today the campaign fighting for public transportation, but let's make sure that our communities have access to the food and the water and, the protective equipment they need today so that we can resume that fight for public transportation next week. And I think it's also supporting everyone to recognize that we're all going to come back into the world at a slightly different moment, under slightly different experiences, and being ready to kind of go on that unique campaign journey in different places around the world.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. We are so many more things than just the campaign we represent or just the family we come from, the community that we live in. But we are one human family, and returning to that all the time. I even liked what you were saying about some of the ways you're adapting with your office, your friends, and things like that. I can say, as somebody who comes from a fairly large family, that gathering everybody online for a game of Trivial Pursuit and dealing with the technological complications and an elderly parent was both comic relief as well as a fun game night. But we continue on. And so when we pick up, let's figure out how we continue that togetherness in a new way. It goes, I shouldn't say it goes without saying, I'm going to say it anyway. This is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And we are in Earth Week. In fact, it's even broadened. And I wanted to ask you a question about that. You know, I suppose first maybe a remark that it is funny to be sitting 50 years later from something that was created at the initiative of one person to realize how important one individual's actions can be. And I look to that because I see that in the inspiration I draw from all of the work that you do, both in your own individual capacities as well as in the teams and the projects that you lead. But I wonder if you could each reflect a bit on how this Earth Day is different from the 49 that preceded it. And how should future Earth Days look like if you have your choice? Jessy Macneil-Brown, let's start with you.
Well, this Earth Day turned out very different to the one that we were planning at IKEA, and we had planned activities for our stores where we could bring together families, where we could encourage our co-workers to hit the streets in any activities that were happening. So we had to pivot very quickly around that reality. So we focused our messages on social media. How can you start the conversations? How can you have those at home? And I would like to think, I hope it's not just my echo chamber, but that people have a real appreciation for nature at the moment. People are really appreciative of whatever little green spot or piece of nature that they have, whether they can go out and walk in that nature once a day like we have in the UK, or you can be a bit more free, or maybe you're not even allowed out. And so I think a lot of people have that renewed appreciation, and I would love to see us hold on to that for future Earth Days. We're expecting that Earth Day next year will be around the time or leading up to the COP conference that I mentioned. So the big UN conference that happens once a year. And this conference is really focused on the government targets to reduce emissions, to reduce carbon, so that we can stop climate change and keep global warming down. So that is going to be a really key moment next year for the next Earth Day. And I just hope following that, it will be our road to recovery. I'm ever the optimist, but I'm really hopeful that we will see that a green, sustainable recovery is the best option for COVID, and that will set us on our track. And I saw a friend actually post on Facebook today a message to himself saying, today, our Prime Minister said this is the situation. And I've posted this because I want it to come up as a reminder every year that this is where we were and this is where we're going to be in the future.
Yeah. Always reminding ourselves of that. That's so important. And thank you for also mentioning the relationship to the COP, the annual UN meeting. This was supposed to be the year for COP26. And when the Paris Agreement was created in 2015, 196 nations came together and signed and agreed to those principles of reducing their emissions. And this was supposed to be the year that we peaked emissions, and then after that radically scaled down. So we do have to remind ourselves of those moments in time and not lose sight of them simply because of what's happened to derail us. We have to refortify our efforts. So Jessy Tolkan, how is this Earth Day different from the 49 that preceded it? And what is your future for Earth Day going to look like?
As always, a bit of the rebel, I'm going to say one thing about how this Earth Day is similar to Earth Day 49 years ago. So when Dennis Hayes was the first coordinator of Earth Day 50 years ago, he was an ambitious, somewhat radical in all the right ways young leader, leading his peers to kind of make a statement on behalf of the planet. And here we are 50 years later, and we have to recall what a remarkable year it's been. And like that first Earth Day, how it has been the power of young people and young leaders via the school strikes, via unbelievable organizing around the world, organizing that has managed to evolve and translate into this digital moment with incredible virtual marches and strikes and activity around the world. So I couldn't help but draw that critical thread of the role of young people being at the forefront. And many of us point to Greta, but there's so many remarkable young leaders that are really pushing us. And I think I have such faith in our ability to propel this movement forward, even coming out of this COVID-19 crisis, because of that united leadership amongst a generation of fearless leaders around the world. I think what makes this Earth Day obviously quite different is something that's also going to be a strength. As we are confined, we don't have that same freedom to be out in the world. We have taken a pause as a global community. I hope that this ends up being a more reflective Earth Day. I hope it is an opportunity where we realize what we can and can't take for granted in the world. And as you know, Earth Day celebrations are, you know, happening, as you say, over Earth Week and being broadcast over so many channels with participation of leaders ranging from the Pope to local government leaders to unbelievable young leaders from every walk of life in every corner of the globe. I think it's an opportunity to potentially have the most global and international and interconnected celebration of Earth Day we've ever had. And I will stand arm in arm with the other Jessie on this call to say, we are going forward full speed ahead to make sure that we have an epically strong green recovery and that we move right into next year's COP with greater ambition and focus than we've ever had before.
Well, thank you so much. You know, I don't know what the size of our online audience is out there, but I really am hoping that one of the people in our audience is Sherry from Wisconsin, which is Jesse's mom. So if you're out there, thanks for raising Jessy Tolkan. She's been a good egg. We really enjoyed it. I know that one of the lovely things about being able to do this is that we can gather online and share the brilliance of the experts that we bring to this audience and hopefully answer your questions. The downside is we only have 45 minutes, and so we're actually kind of coming to an end. And I just want to emphasize a few things as we wrap up. One is that I think what I'm hearing from both of these extraordinary women is the importance of unprecedented collaboration, how important it is that people from every walk of life at the intersections of commerce and finance and creative endeavors and civil society, that people pull together. And that's what we've had to do in COVID anyway. And it is what we have to do in climate. We have to treat this with the level of crisis that it deserves. The second thing that really comes home to me is how much individuals matter. And I think you hear it in the stories that we've heard from both Jessies today too. It becomes heroic what some people are doing. And we see that both in healthcare workers, but also just in the everyday acts of neighbors reaching out to neighbors. And that's been really important too. And that's something we can bring back to our sense of nature and our ability to protect the planet as we go forward. And I really, really am enthused and inspired by this hashtag that Jessy Macneil-Brown shared with us that will be launched called Together with Kindness. Hashtag Together with Kindness. Write it down, tweet it out, be behind it, and share your ideas. And I'm just going to turn one more time to both of our experts and ask them, what's the first thing that you and your organization are going to do when everything gets back to normal, if there is such a thing as normal? So Jessy Macneil-Brown.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's going to be a normal, and we are trying to lean into the positives and the opportunities of how we need to change the way we do things. But what I'm hearing across my team and what I'm also very keen to do is just to have a fika, sit down with each other to have that personal contact. I think that's the thing that everyone's really craving right now. So we just want to be together in the same room.
Fika being, of course, the Swedish celebration over coffee
Yes.
and cake and things like that.
Yeah, that's the Australian telling you about Fika.
Jessy Tolkan, how about you?
I think taking to the streets is going to look slightly different in this new normal, but I think we look forward to being back out in the world with our organizational partners, with communities at large, fighting for the future we believe in. And if we have to do that 6 feet apart from one another, we absolutely will. We'll gather in beautiful public places and dig back into the fight ahead of us.
That's right. And it's quite a fight. And yet it's a fight that we take on with a lot of joy because we love this planet. It's the only one that we've got. And at IKEA Foundation, we are committed to protecting the planet and to helping people afford a better everyday life. And I think you've heard from our experts today why this fight is worth what it is. It is the fight of our lifetimes. So with that, I'm going to wind up and thank you all for being in our audience. We will get back to answer any questions online that we didn't get to talk about today. And I'm going to turn it back to our lovely host, Ryan.
Thank you so much. And really, thank you so much, Jessie and Jessie, for your insightful comments and for your wonderful answers. I think it was a great conversation. And Liz, you're a fantastic host. Thank you so much for taking the time, everyone. To all the people who are watching online, we appreciate you watching. We're going to have another one next week. And to those who are watching a little bit later and from different countries around the world, translating and all that kind of stuff, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you as well. So with that, I will say a big thank you to all three of you. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Be safe.